Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of You're Not Crazy, You're Exhausted. And today we're going over something that I am sharing with you about me and my test results, and something that I was so surprised about because I didn't think in a million years that my gut was this bad based on my symptoms. But it kind of gives you an idea of how we get used to feeling when we're going on with the busyness of life, when we maybe have a little extra stress in our life. It kind of goes to show that sometimes how we're feeling isn't actually normal. And there's things that we can do to feel so much better. I do believe, based on the results of my recent GI map test, that I did just kind of because I hadn't done one for a while and I thought I should just check this out, see how it's been. I am not feeling the greatest lately, but I pretty much attributed all of this to just having issues with some extra stress in my life, right? And who doesn't have that? So when I tell you I was shocked with the results, I can't overestimate that enough. I can't explain that enough, I should say. So here's what happened. So like I said, I just wanted to do an updated GI test. I hadn't done one for probably, I don't know, years, probably 4 or 5 years. And I've been doing these a lot on the people I'm working with in my one-on-one programs and my hybrid programs. And I just thought I should probably take a look at this. Even though I don't really have any symptoms, I thought I would do this. So here's the results. And I'm just going to go through each section, kind of highlighting things. And then I'm going to take you through what my plan and protocol is to help heal my gut. And I'm going to take you on this journey with me so you can see what it's like to work in this space. If you have some GI issues or if you don't think you have them like I do, you kind of want to start there when you are trying to overcome some symptoms or just wishing you feel better or wanted to get even a baseline of your health. You probably should start with your gut. And so I just wanted to take you through this whole process, and I'll take you with me over the next few months so you can see the process that I'm going through, and I will report back symptom improvement along the way and also kind of correlate that to some of the things going on in my life that add extra stress or burden to the whole process, because that's everybody. Everybody has something going on, the busyness of life, a career, a move, and all the things. So we are going to go through this process, and hopefully you can see that if you're one of those people that feels kind of terrible and you get told your labs are normal and you get frustrated because you are just sick and tired of being sick and tired, but there's never any answers, you might want to start here. And one thing I will say, when we do this, when we go through these panels of people, we go deep. I'm with you for the long haul. We navigate any issues that come up and we go through things very, very thoroughly. And we're with you every step of the way. So that's what I want to take you through so you can see what's going on. So let's just go through the test first. The first section that we go through is about the pathogens. And luckily, that's one thing that did not show up for me was the pathogens. And so I'll just kind of scroll through here, but you can see that the result, this is my result, that nothing was detectable here in this particular test. Okay, so that's just some of the information. Then we go through the H. pylori. This is a bacterial infection, and this can be kind of a bugger to deal with if there is, some kind of major infection. I have just a teeny little bit of something going on here. The virulence factors are pretty much, non-existent. As you can see, it's reported negative. But this could be just another, indicator of some dysbiosis, it contributing to intestinal inflammation and that kind of thing. So it's more something to be aware of. And I decided to be a little extra cautious with the type of enzymes for digestion that I'm using, just with this flagged a little bit, just for a time. And I can explain that in a little bit as well. But here's where kind of the big players are here, the commensals, the keystone bacteria. These are the kind of the big players in your overall microbiome, all the bacteria in your gut, the balance of them that we need to actually be helpful and beneficial to us. And you can see I either have some pretty high things or pretty low things. There's only a couple that are sort of in that green and that normal level. And even those are on the high end or the low end of normal. So with that being, just with this being, apparent, we have to figure out how do we have more balance and how do we have more diversity within the gut so that you have overall, better health. And there's research that talks about this. And so we need to fix this. We need to recalibrate the GI, right? Making sure we're having good microbiome, a good balanced microbiome. And right now, this is not it. So then we look at the bacterial phyla. These are kind of considered, these Bacteroidetes and the Firmicutes. These are considered the keystone species. They make up a large majority of your gut microbiome, and I am, pretty extremely high in each of these categories. I should be, both of them should be in the green, and so that is something that needs to get again be recalibrated. So in general, we're trending. Here's some notes that I have here. In general, we're trending towards overgrowth, clearly, on some of these things already there. Higher levels of multiple keystone species. This is often associated with maldigestion, lots of undigested proteins, carbs getting down to the large colon and feeding microbes. And these could be either the beneficial bacteria or the opportunistic ones, which we'll talk about in a second. This alone can lead to inflammation and crowding out of neighboring microbes. Okay, so one of, I would say, my big symptom that I have during this time is this unexplained, pretty extreme inflammation, even in my hands, my feet, my legs, my face. I mean, and it changes day to day. I can even see swings on the scale from 2 to 10 pounds over a couple of days. And it's just all this like puffiness and inflammation. So where is this coming from? And then just to back up, I have, a history of thyroid cancer. I don't have a thyroid due to the thyroid cancer, spread to my lymph nodes. And you might assume that there's some lymph drainage issues that have been happening ever since that process, occurred, the surgeries and that kind of thing. So I'm on medication for life, and it's a balancing act, getting the medications all, at the levels that you need them. So there's just things like that that kind of made me think that this is what was going on. But again, I don't have obvious GI symptoms. A lot of times people come to me for really obvious things where it's like affecting their daily life. And that was not my case at all. And so that's what was so surprising about this. But when I see the results in just this page, even, I start to think about, maybe this is why when I eat something, kind of a small serving of something, I feel really, really full, like too full. And what I start to realize that I guess I didn't really understand what bloating was for me. So maybe that was bloating, where when people talk about the bloating that they have, sometimes people have said, I look like I'm 6 months pregnant. And I didn't feel that that was the result of my bloating, but that feeling of fullness, if I'm not able to digest protein and carbs very efficiently, that's going to sit there like a rock for way too long and not feel good. And I'm going to feel full on very little food. Okay. So, and then the end game of that is that it's not being broken down. It's not being assimilated into the bloodstream. It is not being incorporated into my body. It is not fueling my body. The nutrients from the foods that I'm eating, no matter how healthy they are or not, they're not being broken down and absorbed by the body efficiently at all. So that is what is happening here with some of those symptoms that I did not think were that big of a deal. Okay, so here are the opportunistic organisms and where the things are overgrown. You can see where they're flagged high, many of them. And all of this sort of explains that there is probably insufficient stomach acid to break down the foods and specifically the proteins. And in addition to this, they can activate, the immune system. They create histamine or release histamine into the system. That alone can explain, headaches and lethargy and swelling. Some of these overgrowth microbes create something called lipopolysaccharide, LPS, which is a toxin to the body that is very inflammatory. And so I have one thing that wasn't detectable on this, that Morganella, but everything else was either highly detectable, much maybe higher than it should have been, and then actually flagged high. All right, so this is something that needs to be addressed, and I'm going to go through the first phase with you and tell you what we're doing in this first phase and explain the reasons behind that. But this right here are probably the big players in those symptoms of kind of feeling really full because I can't break down. I don't have enough stomach acid. And if you are a thyroid patient, it is not uncommon for this to be an issue to have insufficient stomach acid. And that is why proper digestive enzymes will be very important. The good news is there is a lot of these inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria that were not detected at all. So I was happy about that. And then we look at the commensal inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria. And again, I have a very high level of one of them called Enterobacter, and they create and they release LPS, that lipopolysaccharide toxin. They release like hydrogen sulfide, which is a gas, and then histamine, which is the reason why in allergy season, environmental allergy season, we're taking, Claritin and Zyrtec and things like that. It's the same type of thing, but it starts in the gut, becomes kind of systemic. And then the Th17 activity that has to do with your, immune system. So there is definitely something flagging here that is contributing to the symptoms that I'm feeling. All right, so good news is that there's no fungi, no candida, which is kind of a really hard thing to get rid of at times. It can take a long time. And then no viruses. So that is good to see. No parasites either. I know oftentimes people are thinking that they have parasites. I mean, and the truth of the matter is that we pretty much all have parasitic, even parasitic bacteria. We have actual parasites. It's not uncommon. It's whether or not they're detectable. It's whether or not they're causing damage. If they're overgrowing, that is, more of the problem. Most people are not walking around with tapeworms and things like that. So that is good news for most people. I think there's sometimes a little bit too much worry about parasites. And then we get down to intestinal health markers. Okay, so these are just looking at the enzymes and your immune system in your gut. So let's take a look at this. So it looks like with the steatocrit and the elastase, this shows that I have very poor pancreatic output, meaning the enzymes that help you break down and digest and absorb and assimilate the nutrients from your foods is lacking. There's just not a lot going on there. Where there's some fat malabsorption, because there's some bile dysfunction. So I have a gallbladder and to my knowledge don't have any issues with it, but clearly it is not helping you with breaking down fats. So this is where people can have, some major issues with digestion. There's definitely some barrier damage, meaning my intestinal barrier. So it's like what you see with celiacs, or can see, I should say, with celiacs, intestinal bowel disease, chronic dysbiosis, and then, of course, low stomach acid and elastase, and it can lead to high motility, as in hyperthyroidism. Okay, then we look at the beta glucuronidase and occult fecal blood. That was pretty much normal. The beta glucuronidase is a little bit on the high side. And so that has to do with, detoxing basically and helping you with breaking down of more more things that I'm not breaking down. And so that's something that is sort of being addressed along the way. It's not specific to what we're doing, but it's going to be helpful and kind of correct itself with the protocol that I have in place. And now we look at the immune response. So I have a low secretory IgA. This is the immune system in your gut and your mucosal lining of your gut. So we want that to be much better. We want it to be, 700 or something like that. I'm at 297. Anti-gliadin, IgA, this is the protein for gluten. And what I see for this for myself is that I am sure I've, since however long that, this test looks back, I'm sure I've been cross contaminated. I'm sure I have not been as careful with some travel things so that I've been not as careful being gluten free. So technically, I would have expected that number to be elevated, but what it shows, it's very normal. But I believe it's because my immune system, the secretory IgA, is so low that my immune system, my gut didn't even respond to the gluten. It's just kind of like, not really handling it, kind of phoning it in, not really doing much about it. So that's kind of a problem there. So, we again just kind of remain like as gluten free or low gluten as possible to help correct this. Then we look at the zonulin, which is I always add this to the test results, or it's an add-on part of the test, and I always do that because I think it's very important. Because it tells us how well your intestinal permeability is, and we want that number to be under 110, which is optimal. I know it says that we want it to be less than 175, but we need it to be less than that because it could be compromised. Your barrier in your gut could be compromised. It's going to be less selective. It's going to allow all kinds of things through food particles, toxins, whatever it may be, and it's going to contribute to that inflammation. So, zonulin is a protein in your GI tract that opens and closes these things called tight junctions. And the wider open they are, the more permeability you have. That's where we call it leaky gut. You've heard that term before, probably. So definitely there's some increased intestinal permeability here. It's less selective. It's allowing things in that shouldn't. And just some notes here on the bottom, referring back to that elevated beta glucuronidase. This will undo this is talking about the detox. It'll undo the glucuronidation in phase 2 liver detox, which causes you to have a higher risk for recirculation of hormones and toxins throughout the body, and basically like toxin reactivation. So your liver is processing toxins all the time. And right now, because of the level that I have, it's probably making me more susceptible to toxin recirculation and hormone recirculation and things like that. So this can contribute to conditions like colorectal cancer and inflammatory bowel disease. So we need to add things like flaxseed, chia seeds, fiber, calcium D-glucarate, high dose probiotics. So at some point we will be getting to that. Then it talks about antibiotic resistance genes that would be, say, if I needed to treat myself or get myself treated for H. pylori, and I'm not doing that with any kind of antibiotic because it's not to that level. But this is kind of nice because it tells you which things would be more beneficial to use, more effective against the H. pylori. And here it doesn't really apply to me. Everything is negative or, not showing any result. Okay, so here is I'm gonna show you the whole plan. And let's see here. There's 3 phases. Okay. But I'm gonna go through just the first phase right now and explain what's going on and what's happening. Okay. So I'm going to focus on, or have been focusing on, low histamine diet. So that means, eating leftovers of animal products, like keeping that to a minimum. Or when you're meal prepping, if you cook some chicken breast or something like that, you want to flash freeze it and then eat it the next day or whenever. You don't want to eat leftovers of animal proteins in particular. Those are very high in histamine or can create more and more histamine, so we want to minimize that as much as possible. And then continue to limit gluten. I'm adding pancreatic enzymes because the ones that don't have hydrochloric acid in them for this time, at 2 of them at each of the main meals. So every time I have a main meal, I wouldn't do this for just a small snack or something like that. But I'm putting them in at each main meal, and that will help with digestion. I'm doing a scoop of something called IgGI Shield. This is to help the intestinal barrier. I do that at night away from food before I go to bed, along with something called Tributyrin Supreme. This is a butyrate helper. Butyrate is helpful for your GI lining. Take 2 capsules nightly with the IgGI Shield. And then in the morning, I actually do this in the morning, the SPM Supreme. It is for helping reduce inflammation throughout the body. And I take that twice, 2 capsules with food. And I also am taking something called Histogest. DAO. It's an enzyme to help break down histamine. I take that with my last meal of the day or the meal that has maybe a higher protein content. I try to balance my protein throughout the day, but I try to take it at least once a day. And like I said, specifically, more with that last meal of the day to help with that histamine response. Cause I definitely, like, I have a history of having a lot of environmental allergies. And then now I've got it coming from inside too, that systemic part of it that's starting in my gut because of that overgrowth of bacteria. So that's what I'm doing to help this process now. So this phase is about 2 to 4 weeks, and I'm on about week 3, but there's been some travel in there, so I haven't been very consistent with some of the days with all the supplements. So I am going to probably just let this linger a little bit longer and, make sure that when I'm able and I'm home and I have a stable schedule, that I'm really getting all these things in as much as possible. And then, of course, just trying to have a clean as possible diet, which, this summer has been proving difficult for me, just with stuff going on and traveling. Like I said, it's just been a little bit more difficult, but I'm trying to not go to the extremes on everything and just try to just keep on keeping on. So what I would like to do is explain a little bit. Like I said before, I didn't think I couldn't believe that I had this many things that were pretty high overgrowth or undergrowth or whatever. I was shocked by that because I didn't, as much as I don't feel super awesome right now, I kind of attributed most of that to stress. But I think a lot of it is coming from my gut. And I didn't really think of it because, again, there wasn't these overt, obvious symptoms of GI problems. And I probably kind of thinking of that as it kind of works with the people that I'm working with on this, because a lot of times there's just people have these horrible extreme symptoms where they can barely function throughout the day, and that was not my situation. So what I think has improved is that I feel that some of the inflammation is starting to subside. It's still there. It still flares on and off for kind of unknown reasons. Sometimes things are obvious of what caused it, but other times not so much. And I noticed that I feel like I actually get hungry now versus feeling full really quickly and then staying full for a really long time. I actually will wake up and feel hungry, which hasn't happened now for quite a while. I always kind of attributed that to having, poor thyroid function and just having a sluggish digestive, response or hunger response or whatever because of thyroid, which is something that I have noticed for a lot of time, a lot of years actually. So anyway, that is the improvement I'm seeing. Again, this first phase is almost like a prep phase to kind of set your body up for what we're doing in the next phase. And then the next phase that I'll go through at another time is I'll explain it a little bit more then. But basically, now we're going to go in and attack those overgrowths and get those things balanced out so that my body will function even more normally. That is the goal with that. So I hope this has been helpful. And if it has been helpful for you, you probably know someone else that this could benefit. And if you feel like this kind of sounds like you and you haven't ever looked at your gut, or if you haven't looked at it for a long time, I want you to reach out. We can help you out with this. And as I have said, it is a process where you don't just do a functional test and then get a bunch of supplement recommendations and be on your merry way. You're getting a lot of support. You're getting hand holding. You're getting, you know, the chance to understand when issues arise and how to navigate and how to switch things. And you're getting that support so that you can actually feel so much better. And I have to say, in all the time that I've done this lab with people and gone through the process, the only time that it hasn't improved symptoms when we go through the process, and everybody's process is different, is when they don't do the thing, when they don't follow the recommendations. That's the only time that it doesn't improve, which is awesome to have for people, because people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. So let me know if this is helpful to you. I'd love to hear your comments. So put them below, and then I will be back later to go into this further. And if you are just listening to the podcast, I encourage you to hop over to YouTube so you can actually follow along with the test results, and it will make more sense to you there. So, anyway, hope this has been helpful. Have a great day, and we'll be back soon. Bye.